Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're tracking a world in rapid transition.
The map on the wall hasn't changed, but the ink is bleeding. The global policeman didn't just retire, he burned down the precinct on his way out. We are now living in the era of the vacuum.
This is Neural Pulse. Let's analyze.
Yeah.
Our focus today is to really synthesize what's being called the poly-crisis of early 2026. For you, the listener, our mission is to distill the core structural shift under all of this. And that shift is the uncompromising, unapologetic return of hard power.
Exactly. It's the primary way major nations are enacting their will now. It's selective, sometimes it's violent, but it's always decisive.
And what's so striking is how sudden it feels, the dissolution of those post-Cold War norms.
It's completely structural. We've moved beyond, these ambiguous proxy wars. Now we're seeing direct, aggressive interventionism, economic siege warfare, high-stakes escalation, and the clearest signal that the rules have changed, well, it comes from right here in the Western Hemisphere.
Let's unpack that first event then. The U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. The core facts are pretty clear. Nicolas Maduro arrested, key political figures seized, and then the U.S. declares it will manage the country's oil infrastructure.
Right.
The term everyone's using is Monroe Doctrine 2.0. It sets a whole new precedent.
It's a terrifying precedent, really, because this new doctrine, it completely inverts the old one. I mean, the original Monroe Doctrine from 200 years ago was a declaration that the U.S. would stop European powers from intervening in the Americas. It was supposed to be a shield.
And now?
Now it's a sword. It's not about prohibiting others anymore. It's about proactively claiming political and resource control. If you strip away all the rhetoric, democracy, liberation, the standard stuff, you see three cold strategic goals behind this.
Okay, so walk us through the strategic calculus here.
The first goal was the immediate elimination of hostile influence. Venezuela had become this key foothold for Russia, China, and critically, Iran. And our sources are confirming that the real red line was Russia's shadow fleet of oil tankers.
They were just operating freely off the coast.
With impunity, circumventing all kinds of sanctions. That was seen as a major security breach. And it required a physical, decisive, and, immediate military solution.
Okay, that makes sense from a security perspective. But let's zoom in on that second goal you mentioned, pure energy control. The stated plan is to run and fix the oil infrastructure. The idea is to boost supply, neutralize OPEC+, and lower gas prices in the U.S. But how realistic is that?
That's the critical question, isn't it?
The sources are pretty clear those facilities are decades past any real repair.
You're right. It is aspirational, certainly. But the intention is the weapon here. A massive supply increase isn't happening next month. But the intervention, it sends this powerful signal to Riyadh, to Moscow, that the U.S. is willing to use hard power to control a massive global supply source. It's an attempt to put a structural ceiling on oil prices.
And the third goal?
Strategic triage. Simple as that. You solve the Venezuela problem with force, and you can pivot. You reallocate all those military and strategic resources that were tied up in your backyard, and you free them up to focus on the Asia-Pacific, on China, and the Middle East.
It's cleaning up the map to concentrate power where it matters most.
A classic great power maneuver.
And the market reaction really reflects that split between short-term fear and long-term expectation. WTI crude, it spiked to $63.50 a barrel right after the intervention.
But that spike just evaporated, didn't it? Almost immediately.
Right. And why?
Because the analysts know the facilities are dilapidated. You can seize the oil fields, but reconstruction will take decades and billions of dollars. So the immediate risk of a supply disruption or a supply flood is actually minimal. It keeps the price stable, around that $60 mark for now.
That makes sense for oil. But the bond market is a completely different story. Venezuelan government and PDVSA bonds, they surged. Their yields just dropped like a rock. Why would anyone rush into those defaulted toxic assets?
Because for investors, U.S. management is the fast track to economic normalization. The military intervention is treated like the ultimate seal of approval. It's a guarantee of future debt restructuring and eventually repayment. It sends a really dangerous message that sometimes hard power is seen as the fastest route to market stability.
So if the U.S. is using intervention to define hard power, let's pivot to East Asia. China is defining it through economic weaponization. Tensions between Beijing and Tokyo are, they're the worst they've been in decades.
And the trigger was Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's Takatichi Doctrine. She publicly linked a Taiwan conflict directly to Japanese security and cooperation with the U.S. For Beijing, that crossed a massive political line.
And China's response wasn't just a diplomatic note. It was, as you called it, a strategic siege warfare.
That's the term they used, yes. Hirizami. It literally means starving the enemy of resources. Beijing just massively restricted exports of over 1,000 items to Japan. They went right for the rare earths and dual-use goods.
Weaponizing the supply chain.
Exactly, to punish a geopolitical stance.
And this just brutally exposes Japan's Achilles heel. Even after years of trying to diversify, Japan is still about 60% dependent on China for heavy rare earths, specifically dysprosium and terbium, di and tabi.
And these aren't just some obscure minerals.
No, Rattle.
They are mission critical. Di and Tb are essential additives for high-performance permanent magnets. And why should you, the listener, care about that? Because those magnets are in everything. Electric vehicle motors, wind turbines, and most crucially essential Japanese defense tech.
So Japan can build a state-of-the-art destroyer, but without those rare earths, the missile guidance system is useless. The drone components don't have power. It creates an immediate crippling bottleneck for their entire defense capability.
It's a pressure point that works right away. If you threaten their economy, they might retaliate. But if you threaten their ability to build a reliable tank, you create panic.
So what's the countermove? We've seen G7 finance ministers, plus India, Australia, South Korea, all agreeing to accelerate de-risking strategies.
And that's a crucial distinction. It's not decoupling. That would be financially ruinous. De-risking is about mitigating exposure. It means investing in alternative sources, securing domestic processing, making sure your key industries can't be crippled by a single supplier.
But there's a huge shadow over that whole strategy, isn't there? President Trump's deal-focused diplomacy with China. That means Japan can't rely solely on the U.S. in a trade war. They have to find their own solutions, and fast.
And that uncertainty, whether your strongest ally will stick with you or pivot to a transactional deal, that's exactly why this global vacuum feels so profound. Every nation is now forced to hedge its bets.
Let's move on to a major power facing, potential implosion, Iran. The crisis there is driven by internal factors, starting with the health of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. He's 85.
The crisis isn't just his age, though. It's the succession. There's more and more evidence that his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, is being positioned to take over. And if that happens, it just completely contradicts the revolution's anti-monarchy principles.
It becomes a dynastic dictatorship,
Which would trigger a massive legitimacy crisis. And this is all layered on top of a catastrophic economic collapse. The real yield is worthless. Inflation is out of control.
The state itself seems to be failing.
Precisely. Because the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, has effectively hijacked the economy. It's acting like a giant mafia, controlling almost 40% of the economy through these so-called charitable foundations, the boneyards. They don't pay taxes, they're not supervised, and they just siphon wealth, leaving the elected government powerless.
And yet, despite all this chaos at home, Iran is projecting power abroad. They were just in a Will for Peace 2026 naval exercise off South Africa, alongside Chinese and Russian warships.
And for Tehran, that BRICS Plus drill serves as crucial propaganda. Iran gets to function as the ideological hardener in this growing anti-U.S. bloc.
It proves they aren't isolated.
Exactly. It shows international military cooperation, far ocean capability. It's a powerful distraction from the economic ruin and succession battles back home. It says, we're part of a rising global axis, not a failing state.
That brings us to another conflict that just hit a very somber milestone: the Ukraine war. Russia's invasion has now reached 1,418 days.
Which is the exact duration of the Soviet Great Patriotic War against Nazi Germany. It just signals an unprecedented sustained conflict in modern Europe.
And with that exhaustion comes escalation. We saw Russia deploy the new Oreshnik intermediate-range ballistic missile. It hit a defense facility in Lviv on January 9th.
And the message in that strike? It's pure nuclear signaling.
It was a conventional warhead, though. But it's the missile's design that matters. It's meant to penetrate deep underground facilities.
Right. The strike wasn't about the size of the blast. It was a communication tool, a very loud warning to NATO. Russia demonstrated it can hit critical, deep command and control sites without going nuclear. It says, we can strike your most critical infrastructure wherever it is.
And if all that wasn't enough, we're now seeing institutional crises. The U.S. Justice Department has initiated a criminal investigation against the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell.
This is more than a legal fight. It's a collapse of trust in the central bank's independence. It's widely seen as a politically motivated attack by the administration to remove Powell. And the consequence is that the market now fears the Fed will prioritize political support over controlling inflation.
The market's response tells you everything you need to know about that lack of trust. Gold surged past an all-time record, $4,600 an ounce.
And this isn't just regular inflation hedging.
Right.
This is structural de-dollarization. Central banks, China, Russia, the BRICS plus nations, they are actively reducing their holdings of U.S. dollar assets. They're fleeing the political risk, moving massive reserves into neutral physical assets like gold. The Powell investigation was the tipping point for many.
Let's end on maybe the most visible and dystopian symptom of all this anxiety. Luxury survivalism. We're seeing this rise of high-end bunkers. Atlas missile silos in Kansas being converted with movie theaters. The Oppido in Czechia with pools and wine cellars.
And this is so alarming because it signals a complete break in the social contract. The global elite no longer trust the state, the police, the military international agreements to guarantee their security. They're choosing private, fortified withdrawal instead.
They're accelerating a dangerous social division.
Exactly. When the most powerful and wealthy are actively building private fortresses to withdraw from a shared reality, all these structural changes we've discussed, they start to feel much more real for everyone else left on the surface.
So we've moved from managed chaos to this unpredictable transformation, designed by U.S. interventionism, economic warfare from China, and the threat of internal collapse in major powers. The vacuum is being filled by force.
The old rules have been discarded. Great powers are prioritizing their own immediate needs above everything else. The global financial anchor is pulling up its moorings.
So the question isn't will there be war? The question is who stops them?
No one. In the vacuum, force is the only law. And when you realize the most powerful among us are building private fortresses to leave the social contract, you have to ask, what does that mean for citizenship and security for everyone else?
Euro Pulse. Clarity in a complex world. See you tomorrow.